Welcome to Close Your Eyes, Listen to Stories. Close your eyes, relax, and let me take you into the story. If you follow the old Norse imagination far enough, you come to a place where nothing stays politely inside its outline. Frost meets fire. Tree roots drink from wells older than the gods. Eagles speak. Wolves swallow suns. In such a world, Loki feels less like an interruption than a natural event, as if the cosmos itself produced one mind quick enough to slip through every crack in its own design. The mythology around him does not place him safely among the shining and orderly powers. He is born from the giant line, and that matters. The sources call his father Farbody, a name often understood as dangerous striker, perhaps a hint of lightning or violent impact, and his mother Laufey, sometimes called El, whose name may suggest leaves or slenderness. Even here, at the doorway of his life, there is uncertainty. Loki stands between harsh force and something delicate, between the blow and the thing that trembles after it. He is not an Aesir by birth, not one of the gods in the simple inherited way that Thor is. Yet he moves among them, eats with them, jokes with them, travels with them, and in one important poem reminds Odin that the two once mixed blood and swore themselves to one another. That detail changes the whole atmosphere around him. Loki is not merely a tolerated outsider, skulking near the edge of Asgard. He is, in the old stories, bound to the high god by oath. He belongs and does not belong at the same time. This is one reason he remains so compelling. He is never only one thing. In different passages, he is called handsome, clever, sly, malicious, useful, eloquent, and impossible to trust. Snorri Sturluson, writing in medieval Iceland, says Loki is beautiful in appearance, but wicked in spirit and highly variable in behavior. Even that neat sentence feels too still for him. Loki is better understood as motion. You can picture the world he inhabits as a set of neighboring realms held together by Yggdrasil, the great ash. Asgard, home of the gods, is not far in spirit from Jotunheim, land of giants, though the two are often enemies. The border is busy. Marriages cross it. Quarrels cross it. Prophecies cross it. So does Loki again and again, as if boundary itself were the element in which he breathes most easily. He is one of the few figures who can move almost anywhere, into giant halls, into godly councils, into disguise, into female form, into animal shape, into laughter, into catastrophe. Later ages try to file him into simpler categories. Was he a devil figure, smuggled backward into pagan myth through Christian imagination? Was he once a fire god, as some older scholars guessed? Was he an ancient sacred clown, a ritual mocker, a cosmic scapegoat? None of those labels holds him for long. The medieval poems present a being more alive than any theory. He is the wit at the table who makes everyone uneasy because he notices too much. He is the fixer whose solutions leave a bruise. He is the companion who will save you in one tale and ruin you in another. Even his name refuses to settle easily. Scholars still argue over its origin. Some connect it with knots or loops, fitting for a god who tangles plots and untangles them again. Others remain unconvinced. This uncertainty is oddly appropriate. Loki is a figure made of unstable meanings. In one poem, he races through the sky in borrowed feathers. In another, he becomes a mare. In another, he sits bound while venom falls above him. He is not a symbol cut in stone. He is a story force, always changing shape faster than certainty can follow. The gods themselves seem unsure how to hold him. Thor often threatens him. yet travels with him constantly. Odin tolerates him far longer than wisdom would recommend. The goddesses sometimes distrust him, sometimes rely on him, sometimes become the object of his dangerous schemes. When halls are calm, Loki can make them lively. When tension is already in the air, he can turn one sharp feeling into a feud that lasts generations. He does not simply bring chaos from outside. He reveals how much unrest was already waiting inside the polished beams of Asgard. And yet it would be too easy and too modern in the wrong way to treat him as a charming rebel with no moral weight. The old sources do not flatter him like that. Loki is funny, yes. He can be dazzling, but he is also vain, resentful, thin-skinned, and capable of cruelty that goes far beyond clever mischief. What makes him three-dimensional is that his gifts and his flaws spring from the same root. The mind that can leap where others plod can also fail to stop when restraint is needed. The tongue that can rescue a crisis can also poison a room. So when you first meet Loki in the mythic North, it helps to imagine not a cartoon villain and not a tidy hero, but a figure standing in a doorway while cold air moves around him. He is smiling, perhaps. He has already noticed more than he should have. Beyond him are the halls of the gods, the dark roads to giant country, the sea where the world's serpent stirs, and the future ruin called Ragnarok. Loki belongs to all of them a little. That is his danger. That is his charm. And that is why, once he enters the story never again feels fully safe. The early Loki stories often move with a rhythm that becomes almost comic in its reliability. First, he causes trouble out of impulse, vanity, or sheer delight in disturbance. Then someone stronger, usually Thor, threatens to break every bone in his body. Then Loki sets out to repair the damage, and by the time he returns, the world is not merely restored but enriched with treasures it did not have before. It is a pattern that lets you understand why the gods kept him near for so long. He was exhausting, but he was useful in ways no one else could quite match. One of the clearest examples begins with an act so needless that it feels almost childishly perverse. Loki cuts off the golden hair of Sif, wife of Thor. The myths do not offer a noble reason. He does it because he can. When Thor sees what has been done, his anger arrives like weather over open water. Loki quickly understands that wit must now work at the speed of fear. He promises to descend to the dwarves and obtain hair from them that will grow like the real thing. Down in the workshops of the underground smiths, the story brightens with sparks. Loki speaks with the sons of Ivaldi, who forge not only Sif's new hair, but also Skidbladnir, the ship that can be folded like cloth and yet always finds favorable wind, and Gungnir, the spear later carried by Odin. Already you can see the strange productivity of Loki's disruptions. A cruel prank has opened the way for marvelous objects to enter the world. But Loki is rarely content to stop while fortune still runs beside him. He wagers his own head that two other dwarven brothers, Brokkr and Eitri, cannot make finer things. The wager becomes a contest. While the smiths labor, Loki transforms himself into a fly and tries to sabotage their work. He bites the craftsman, first on the hand, then the neck, then at last between the eyes, where blood runs down and nearly blinds the smith at the forge. Even so, the brothers complete their gifts. The boar Gullinbursti with golden bristles, the ring Dropnir from which new rings drip, and Thor's hammer Mjolnir. Because of Loki's interference, the hammer's handle comes out shorter than intended, yet it is still the greatest of the lot. Loki loses the wager. When the dwarves come to claim his head, He protests with classic trickster precision that he offered only the head, not the neck. Unable to take one without the other, they settle for sewing his lips shut. It is a wonderfully revealing moment. Loki is punished not by death, but by forced silence, which for him may feel even worse. The tale laughs at him, but it also admits his peculiar talent. Without his malice, there would be no need for the journey. Without his silver tongue, there would be no bargain. Without his sabotage, the hammer might not bear its famous compact form. The very object that protects the gods most visibly enters the myth through Loki's bad behavior. He is not outside the making of divine order. He helps shape its tools, even when trying to undermine them. Another famous tale goes further and shows how completely the gods depended on his imaginative shamelessness. A giant builder offers to raise fortifications around Asgard in exchange for an impossible price: Freya, the sun, and the moon. The gods are tempted by the quality of the work, and Loki advises them to accept the bargain so long as the builder finishes in a single winter and receives help from no man. It sounds safe. Then the builder's stallion, Svatalfari, proves so powerful that the walls rise almost complete. Panic spreads through the gods, and once again Loki is reminded that clever advice becomes dangerous when reality refuses to cooperate. This time his solution is as brilliant as it is humiliating. He changes himself into a mare and lures Svatalfari away into the woods. The work stops. The builder, revealed as a giant, loses his claim and is killed by Thor. Months later, Loki returns after a journey no one could have predicted, having borne and given birth to the gray, eight-legged horse Sleipnir, whom he presents to Odin. The myth is absurd, bold, and strangely tender all at once. It also shows something essential about Loki. He is not only a deceiver of others, he is willing, when pressed, to remake even his own body in service of a solution. That willingness to cross categories is one of his deepest mythic signatures. Male and female, god and giant, helper and saboteur, animal and human, companion and enemy. Loki does not respect the boundaries by which the other gods define themselves. Thor is Thor wherever he goes. Tyr remains a war god, Njord a sea god, Freya a goddess of desire and sea-eater. Loki is harder to pin down because change itself seems to gather around him. In a society that valued stable honor, clear roles, and remembered oaths, that fluidity made him both powerful and suspect. You can imagine the gods looking at him afterward with mixed relief and discomfort. The treasures are won. The walls stand. Sleipnir has entered Odin's service. Disaster has once again been turned aside. Yet the means by which it happened are never fully respectable. Loki keeps saving the divine world by methods that remind everyone how fragile their dignity is. He brings gifts, but he also leaves a taste of embarrassment, as if order in Asgard is maintained not by purity, but by bargains made with the most unstable mind in heaven. If you stay with Loki a little longer, you begin to notice that his stories are really stories about movement. He is always on the road, in the air, or in the act of becoming something else. He borrows shapes. He borrows garments. He borrows time before consequences arrive. He does not sit like a god carved over a doorway. He travels, negotiates, improvises. In many myths, he is the hinge that allows the worlds of gods and giants to swing open toward one another. One of the most revealing journeys begins with hunger. Odin, Honir, and Loki travel together and try to cook an ox, but the meat will not heat through. An eagle in the branches tells them the meal will cook if he receives his share. They agree. When the eagle takes too much, Loki lashes out with a pole, only to find the stick stuck fast to the bird and his own hand stuck to the stick. The eagle is the giant Thiazi in disguise. Dangling painfully in the air, Loki is forced to swear an oath. He will lure Odin out of Asgard with her apples of youth. This is one of the darker bargains in his career because the cost falls not on his pride but on the whole divine order. Odin's apples keep the gods from aging. Without them, they begin to wither. Hair grays, skin loosens, strength declines. The old stories rarely pause to linger on the bodily detail, but if you do linger, the effect is haunting. Gods who seemed permanent suddenly look touchable by time. Loki has not merely inconvenienced his companions. He has exposed the hidden condition of their immortality. It must be renewed. When the gods realize what has happened, they seize Loki and threaten him with death. The pattern repeats, but the mood is sharper now. He borrows Freya's falcon cloak, flies to Thiazi's hall, changes Odin into a nut, and carries her back through the air. Thiazi pursues in eagle form, beating after them with terrifying speed, until the gods light a fire within the walls of Asgard and burn the giant as he crosses. The rescue succeeds. Yet once again Loki is both the wound and the stitch. He caused the peril. He alone could move quickly enough to mend it. This tale also contains a quiet, little-known detail about the old Norse imagination. The god's youth is not a permanent state, but a maintained condition. Even divine bodies depend on ritual renewal. Loki, by endangering Odin, briefly reveals a terrifying truth the gods prefer not to think about. In that sense, he acts almost like a rude philosopher. He makes visible the hidden system. He does not intend to enlighten anyone, but he strips away illusion all the same. Other stories lean more openly into comedy. When the giant T'Char steals Thor's hammer and demands Freya as his bride in exchange, it is Loki who borrows the feather cloak again, flies to investigate, and returns with the plan that saves the day. Thor must dress as a bride. Loki will accompany him as a maid. The scene in the giant hall is one of the great comic pieces of medieval mythology. Thor devours an ox, eats salmon, and whole platters of sweets while trying to pass as a shy bride, and Loki explains away each alarming sign with quick lies. When Mjolnir is finally placed in Thor's lap to bless the marriage, the disguise ends in thunderous slaughter. Here, too, Loki matters because he can think under pressure while everyone else burns with outrage. He understands performance. He knows that a line must be detailed to work. He can step into a role without freezing in shame. That makes him invaluable in mythic situations where force alone cannot open the door. Thor may wield the hammer, but Loki often gets him close enough to use it. Their partnership is one of the richest in Norse myth because it joins two radically different forms of power: blunt strength and improvisational intelligence. There's a smaller, stranger detail from the sources that suits Loki perfectly. In the tale of his capture, which comes later, he is said to invent the fishing net. But even before that, you can feel him as a mind that thinks in meshes and angles, in traps and evasions. He is less like a sword than like a woven device. Flexible, clever, easily folded away, dangerous when stretched across the right current. The old poets seem to know that some kinds of intelligence do not shine like gold in a hall. They flicker like fish scales just below the surface. Because he moves so easily between worlds, Loki also carries news, insults, and temptations from one realm to another. He knows the roads to giant country better than many gods born to power. He knows who can be flattered who could be tricked, which oath will hold, and which one is already rotten. This makes him an intermediary, but not a neutral one. Every message passes through his temperament. Every journey changes shape when he is the one taking it. You never receive a pure fact from Loki. You receive a fact warmed by wit or sharpened by grievance. So the middle of his mythology glitters with motion. Feather cloaks rustling in the cold air, chariot wheels over frost, giant halls lit by dangerous hospitality, apples hidden in baskets, lies told just quickly enough to keep the world from cracking. By now you can see why Loki remained indispensable for so long. In a cosmos divided by walls, rivers, and grudges, he was the one figure reckless enough to pass through all of them. The question, growing quietly in the background, is what happens when a being so gifted at crossing boundaries no longer wishes to return on friendly terms. Loki's story darkens when you turn from his jokes to his family. In the giant world, he fathers children with Angrboda, whose name means something like the one who brings sorrow. Their offspring are not small domestic figures tucked politely at the edge of the myths. They are Hel, ruler of the underworld realm that bears her name, Jormungandr, the world serpent laid into the sea, and Fenrir, the wolf whose future growth terrifies the gods. The sources describe Odin learning by prophecy that these children will bring great trouble, and from that moment the gods begin acting not with confidence, but with fear. Fear leaves deep marks on the Norse divine world. Jormungandr is thrown into the ocean, where he grows so vast that he encircles Midgard and bites his own tail. Hel is sent down to govern the dead who do not fall in battle. And in Snorri's description, her body is half flesh-colored and half blue-black, as if she herself were divided between the living and the grave. Fenrir, strongest and most alarming of the three, is raised among the gods for a time because only Tyr has courage enough to feed him. Then even that uneasy tolerance fails. The gods decide he must be bound. The binding of Fenrir is one of those episodes where the moral atmosphere becomes uncomfortably complicated. The gods first try heavy chains, which the wolf snaps. Then they commission the dwarves to make Gleipnir, a soft ribbon forged from impossible ingredients, the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. It is a marvelous list, playful and eerie, as if binding the future requires materials borrowed from absence itself. Fenrir suspects a trick and agrees to be bound only if one of the gods places a hand in his mouth as pledge. Tyr does so and loses that hand when the ribbon holds. Loki is not the center of this scene, but it belongs to his orbit. These are his children, and the fear surrounding them thickens the distance between him and the gods he lives among. It is easy to imagine resentment gathering there like smoke under a roof beam. Loki, who once helped solve the gods' problems, now watches them cast out one child, entomb another in duty, and deceive the third. The poems do not pause to give him a father's lament, and perhaps they would find such softness out of place. Still, the emotional structure is there whether the texts underline it or not. The court of Asgard is not merely punishing monsters. It is teaching Loki that belonging has a limit. Blood and oath do not outweigh fear forever. By the time of the poem Lokasenna, the bitterness has ripened. The setting is a feast in the hall of Aegir, lord of the sea. The gods are drinking. Praise has been given to the servants Fimifeng and Elder for their skill. Loki, irritated by the harmony, kills Fimifeng and is driven out. Then he returns, invoking his old blood brotherhood with Odin to demand a seat and a drink. What follows is not wild chaos, but a highly structured verbal assault. One by one, Loki addresses the gods and goddesses around the hall, dragging forward old scandals, sexual shames, broken promises, cowardices, and hidden humiliations. The poem is startling because Loki is not simply inventing nonsense. He weaponizes memory. He speaks with the cruel pleasure of someone who has watched every face around the table and stored away each weakness for the right moment. He taunts Bragi for lack of courage. He accuses Idun of embracing the killer of her brother. He reminds Odin of practicing seed, a kind of magic associated in the culture with gendered unease, and he accuses Freya of sexual misconduct with gods and elves alike. The insults are not all trustworthy as facts, but they work because they strike at nerves already present in the mythic tradition. Loki does not break the polished surface of Asgard with a hammer. He does it with speech. Many listeners through the centuries have sensed that Lokasenna preserves something important about him. Here he is not yet the late, flattened devil of simple retellings. He is the abrasive truth-teller whose truth is mixed with venom. He says what etiquette forbids. He exposes the instability under divine decorum. The feast becomes unbearable not because he is entirely wrong, but because he is wrong in the wrong way, right in the wrong places, and merciless everywhere. Thor finally arrives, hammer in hand, and that old dependable pattern returns. Loki can dominate the room with words, but when force enters, he retreats. Yet retreat is not defeat. By the end of the feast, the gods' harmony lies in splinters. Loki has reminded them that glory does not erase contradiction, that power does not wash away shame, and that memory is dangerous in the mouth of someone who no longer feels loyalty. If you listen quietly beneath the insults, you can hear another theme as well. Loki has crossed the inner threshold. He is no longer merely the troublesome companion. He has become a voice inside the hall that wants the hall to know itself cannot hold forever. After that, the road toward Baldr's death and Ragnarok feels much shorter. The most consequential turning point in Loki's mythology gathers around Baldr, the beloved son of Odin and Frigg. Baldr dreams of his own death, and the gods are afraid enough to act. In the best-known medieval retelling, Frigg rides through the world taking oaths from fire and water, iron and stone, beasts and birds, sickness and poison, that none will harm her son. The image is beautiful for a moment. It is as if the whole cosmos is persuaded to hold back its hand. Yet one small plant, mistletoe, is overlooked because it seems too young or too harmless to matter. That omission is where Loki enters. Disguised as an old woman in Snorri's version, he learns from Frigg that mistletoe alone has not sworn. He plucks it, shapes it into a dart or slender spear, and carries it to the assembly where the gods are amusing themselves by hurling weapons at Baldr and laughing as they glance away harmlessly. There stands Hodr, Baldr's blind brother, apart from the game because he cannot see to join it. Loki offers to guide his hand. The shot flies. Baldr falls. And with that single motion, the emotional weather of the myths changes forever. It is hard to overstate how strange this act feels in the old tradition. Loki has often endangered the gods before, but usually through impulsive selfishness that later yields to repair. Here there is no repair. Baldr's death is not a prank gone too far. It is a wound in the structure of the world. The bright and gracious presence whom nearly everyone loves passes down to hell. Grief moves through Asgard. Hermod rides to the underworld to negotiate for Baldr's return. Hel agrees on one condition: All things in the world must weep for him. Almost all do. Metals, stones, trees, animals, sicknesses, and human beings are said to weep. Then a giantess named Thok refuses, saying she received no joy from Baldr alive or dead. Let hell keep what she has. Snorri identifies this figure with Loki in disguise. Some scholars note that the whole Baldr narrative survives most fully in late prose sources shaped after conversion, and they argue about how ancient each part may be. Even so, within the mythology as it has come down to us, this refusal matters. It seals Baldr's absence. Loki is not only the initiator of the loss, he becomes the last cold barrier against reversal. From then on, the gods hunt him in earnest. Loki flees to a mountain house with 4 doors so he can watch in every direction. By day, he sits on the hearth and invents a fishing net, a wonderfully practical detail tucked inside a tale of divine punishment. When he sees the gods approaching, he throws the net into the fire and escapes to the river in the shape of a salmon. The gods arrive, find the half-burned pattern, understand its use, and weave the first net from what remains. The chase that follows feels almost intimate compared to the cosmic scale of the crime. Thor wades the stream. Loki slips through fingers once, then is caught as he leaps, and from that grip the salmon is said to have its narrowed tail. The punishment is among the grimmest in Norse myth. Loki's sons Nari and Narfi are seized. In one account, one is turned into a wolf and tears the other apart. The entrails become bonds. Loki is tied to 3 stones in a cave. Above him, the goddess Skadi fastens a serpent whose venom drips onto his face. Only Sigyn, Loki's wife, stands by him. She holds a bowl beneath the poison to catch it. When the bowl fills and she must turn aside to empty it, the venom strikes, and Loki writhes so violently that the earth shakes. Medieval Icelanders heard earthquakes in that image. It is a remarkable mixture of cosmic explanation and domestic sorrow. A wife keeping vigil in a cave while the ground trembles with her husband's pain. Sigyn's presence complicates everything in the gentlest possible way. The myths give her little speech, little display, almost no rhetoric. Yet she endures. If Loki were only a monster, her fidelity would feel ornamental. Instead, it hints that there is something in him or in the bond between them that grief still recognizes. She cannot free him. She can only lessen the suffering one bowlful at a time. That is one of the most human moments in the whole Norse tradition. Amid gods, prophecies, and punishments, devotion becomes a repeated practical act. But the cave is not the end. Loki's bonds hold only until Ragnarok. At the final unraveling, he breaks free, joins the enemies of the gods, and according to the usual account sails with them on Naglfar, the ship made from dead men's nails. He meets Heimdall, the watchman of the gods, and the two kill one another. By then Loki's arc is complete. The boundary crosser, who once moved between worlds as a useful mediator, returns as a breaker of the last border. He has gone from troubling the hall to helping unmake the cosmos. Yet even here, he remains true to his nature. He does not become simple. He becomes final. Loki survives because he does not rest easily in any single explanation. If he were only comic relief, the old poems would have outgrown him. If he were only evil, he would feel flatter than the world that produced him. Instead, he remains alive in the mind because he embodies something people keep recognizing. The unsettling force that exposes weaknesses, solves emergencies by improper means, and then asks, with a half-smile, whether order was ever as pure as it claimed to be. Part of that afterlife belongs to the manuscripts themselves. Most of what you know about Loki comes through texts preserved in medieval Iceland after the North had become Christian, especially the Poetic Edda, a collection of older verse, and Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda, which retells myth for poets and scholars. That means Loki reaches you through layers of memory, performance, and reinterpretation. He is already, in a sense, a shapeshifter before he enters modern culture. What survives is not a single original Loki untouched by time, but a figure continually reframed by the people who found him impossible to forget. That complexity matters because there is little clear evidence that Loki enjoyed a broad independent cult in the Viking Age on the scale of Thor or Freyr. His persistence today is therefore less the persistence of a temple god than of a literary and symbolic presence, though some modern pagan practitioners do honor him. He lives in poems, arguments, theater, scholarship, and retellings. He lives wherever people are drawn to the person who can make a locked room uncomfortable simply by speaking aloud what everyone else agreed to leave unsaid. Modern imagination often splits him into two easier versions. One is the lovable rogue, a glamorous rebel who mocks authority without ever truly staining his hands. The other is the satanic betrayer, a pure engine of malice. The medieval Loki resists both. He helps the gods acquire their greatest treasures. He rescues Odin and thereby preserves divine youth. He also engineers Baldr's death and fights against the gods at Ragnarok. He can make you laugh and then, without warning, lead you to a cave where venom falls. This refusal to simplify is exactly why he stays interesting. There are smaller reasons too, details that cling like burrs to memory. The sewn lips after the wager with dwarves. The gray horse Sleipnir, born from a solution no dignified god would have invented. The feather cloak borrowed again and again, as if flight itself were always temporary, always dependent on someone else's trust. The fishing net sketched in ash beside hearth. The salmon twisting free through cold water. Sijin lifting her bowl. These images are not grand doctrine. They are vivid fragments, and fragments often last longer than systems. Loki also endures because trickster figures answer a deep human curiosity. People live inside rules, but they are fascinated by the one who tests where the rules actually fail. People admire stability, yet they know that every household, kingdom, and institution carries hidden strain. Loki personifies that strain. He is the laugh that goes too far, the question that embarrasses the feast, the improvisation that saves the day but changes the terms of belonging afterward. He reminds you that cleverness is not innocence, and that truth spoken without love can wound as deeply as a weapon. At the same time, there is something almost tender in the way his legend refuses stillness. Other gods sit more comfortably in fixed iconography. Loki keeps moving. He is the rustle in a doorway, the traveler in borrowed clothes, the flicker at the edge of the firelight when shadows begin to look briefly alive. For a bedtime story that makes him oddly gentle in the long run. He does not ask you to believe that the world is simple. He asks you to admit that change is always nearby and that the mind must stay awake to it without letting bitterness harden the heart. So if you let his story settle now, you need not end with the mistletoe dart or the ship of the dead. You can end with quieter images. A hall after laughter has gone thin, and one figure still watching everyone else's face. A road between Asgard and giant country where no border stone can keep a clever traveler in place. A net drying after river water. a bowl lifted patiently against falling poison, a smile that may mean rescue, insult, or warning, depending on when it appears. In that final stillness, Loki remains what he has always been, not a lesson polished smooth, but a living edge. He is the old northern reminder that wit can heal and wound with the same hand, that belonging can fray, that prophecy often ripens inside the smallest overlooked thing, and that stories last longest when they refuse to become comfortable. You do not have to trust him to feel his power. It is enough to walk beside the trickster for a while, hear the cold air move through the branches of the world tree, and let his changing shape recede slowly into the northern mist. And that's where this story comes to a rest. Close your eyes, carry this story with you, and slowly drift off to sleep. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to Close Your Eyes, Listen to Stories. There's always a new story waiting for you here. Sweet dreams.